Thank you all for coming this morning. And so today's Chai with Viji is a little bit different. It's a very personal and very raw discussion and synopsis of the past couple of weeks that I had and wanted to just share because I think there are so many parallels that exist between all of the things that we face in life, transitions as women, but transitions as people. And I would love to just share a little bit with you. I have to tell you, I am certainly jet lagged with the night and day time difference between here and Nepal, the grueling just schedule that we had. It has been a very interesting and challenging transition to come back. So I just put this together last night and a little bit early this morning, but as friends and as community, we'll just go through it together. So I am today going to speak about my journey to see Mount Kailash and all of the places that I visited along the way. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of background because many of you may not know about Mount Kailash. I'm going to talk about some of the preparation that I did and the physical journey itself, some of the places that I have seen, some of the experiences that I have endured. And one of the things that I also spoke about earlier was about adaptations, how we mold to what's happening around us as opposed to what we expect to happen or want to happen. And then the great importance of rest and resilience in any journey, excuse me. And then some of the lessons that I walked away with. And I'd love for this again to just be a conversation. Well, where I traveled, a lot of people thought I went to India, but actually, it's on the border of many countries: India, Nepal, Bhutan, China, and Tibet, which is it's like a disputed region, but now controlled by China. And so the Himalayan mountain range actually crosses all of these countries over here. But where I went was a mountain called Mount Kailash. And it's actually in the western region of Tibet. And while the Himalayas are one of the largest or and rather tallest, highest mountain ranges in the world, Mount Kailash is not the highest, but it does have a significant spiritual meaning. And so one of the things that gives it its meaning is that, first of all, it is very important to many religions in the world. So we have Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and another religion called Bon. And so there are a lot of scriptures in different traditions that speak about Mount Kailash as a place, as a in between heaven and earth because of its height and also because of the altitude and the thinness of the air, and so really just kind of releasing the veil between heaven and earth. But near Mount Kailash are the headwaters of four different major Asian rivers. And so the Indus River, the Sutlej River, the Karnali River, and the Yarlung Sangpo River, and they go in all the cardinal directions. And the other major two water bodies that exist are one that's called Lake Manasarovar, which again is spoken in many traditions. Manas or Manas means mind. And so it's the lake or waters of the mind, thought to be created by the creator himself. And this is actually a freshwater lake. Now, not so much farther away from that is another lake, which is fully salty. And I believe that the waters are connected, but still, this one is purely freshwater and this one is salty. And the importance comes from there's so much mythological history that's overlaid. So we have the physicality of mountain ranges, some of them the highest in the world. We have high freshwater lakes and phenomena that happen that are somewhat unusual. But the physicality, while not exactly correlated, meaning one to one to the mythology, there are stories that have been written thousands and thousands of years ago of places where spiritual beings existed, places where people did penance or austerities, prayers, and how these physical bodies of water represent actually those physical people that are written in the stories. It's unbelievable, but you can do a little bit more research if you're interested. So for me, this was something that I very much, wanted to do because, again, it felt like more than a mountain to me. And having studied and being very much immersed in the Vedic sciences, these stories, these philosophies are something that I integrate every day, into my work. And so one of the things that has been said is that if you walk around this mountain, it's almost like a physical way of not only doing these austerities like the people that have come before, but it is purifying the baggage that we have, in our life. And I very much actually felt that. It's interesting because many people go to Mount Kailash, as a way to, go trekking. And for me, that was not the case at all. It was to kind of connect all of the things that I've studied and also do something for myself, go to a place where it's been written about exactly like I said, where heaven and earth meet. And I kind of wanted to see that. Now, as I come back from the trip, I very much realized that heaven and earth actually wasn't a place for me to go visit, but something that existed within myself.
If I may say,
Yes.
when you described to me where you were going and what you were doing,
Yes.
the the vision for me was just having a little walk around a mountain, right? It was just
Right.
hiking. But
Right.
but when I first felt your energy this morning, that was not what happened.
No.
So I'll shut up there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just interesting because, so there are I always find it quite challenging actually because, when you talk about spirituality and religion and other philosophies, it's so esoteric. It's very difficult for people to connect to. And I find that all of the major spiritual philosophies in the world, what they try to do is try to almost personify and kind of really boil down, in a way that's easy for people to connect to. And in that way, many faiths do that through, like I was talking about, mythology or principles and things like that. And one of the principles is disillusion. There's a thought that this energy of Shiva or energy of transformation, energy of dissolution, we talked about before the talk today, transformation and death. Those kind of energies are supposed to exist or, be felt in this region of the world, especially at this mountain. I saw so many people as we neared the mountain, as we saw it from a distance, really go into like an ecstatic phase. And I was taken aback because I understood kind of what they were relating it to, but they were just so taken by a physical object. And I wondered whether they connected to either the philosophy or the real essence of kind of what the physical structure of the mountain was sharing. But in any case, going into it, I was really, really clear that I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew that it was very important for me to prepare to go. And to be honest with you, I feel like if you go into such a thing, especially connected to transformation, death, these kind of things, you better hold on to your panties because something is going to happen when you get there. What was really interesting is that this also superimposed upon many of the other philosophies was that in the Chinese tradition, this was the year of the fire horse, which I thought was just amazing, and wonderful. And in this year, 2026, which I guess comes only every 60 years, it was that combination of the horse as an animal and its essence of movement, of overcoming things, as well as the fire element of transformation. And it's funny because I thought, well, this fits me, intensity, independence, passion, drive to break old patterns. To be honest with you, I didn't really even know what I wanted to break, but I was open to doing all of it. And it's interesting. There's this dichotomy that we have as women that we're emboldened to do so many things and be on the precipice of so much change and movement in our lives, in the lives of the people that we take care of, in the lives that people, depend on us. And oftentimes we're asked to bring forth this fire energy, but then also told that we're too much. And so I was really curious to see how all of this would meet, not only for me, but for everybody on the trip. And so the first part that I kind of wanted to go over, and there's just so much to talk about on this trip. Preparation was so important, and for me, I did so much research about the things that I needed to bring, the weather that we were going to encounter. I brought everything related to illnesses, being vegan. I brought food with me, snacks, and I even practiced beforehand. I went to higher altitudes. So I went up to 11,000 feet. In the trip, I went up to 18,500. And so, you never really can prepare for such high altitudes. And the thing about high altitude is that you could be a marathon runner. You could have gone and done this trek and been at this high altitude so many times, but each time you go, it's a different case. I've heard about stories about even Sherpas or guides who have done this for many years and they had to be evacuated out because they couldn't do it. So it's something on one level that you can prepare for, and on another level, you can't because you just don't know how it's going to affect you until you get there. What I found interesting in the theme of all of this is that you hear so many things. It's just like when you prepare for any type of birth or even getting pregnant or even postpartum, you hear about all the things that other people do. Hey, this is what I bought. This is what you should do. This is what, is right. This is what is wrong. And I heard all of those things even with the trip. And I just noticed that a lot of people went in, with fear. And so I can't tell you how many times we, meaning myself, my husband, and my friend who went with me, we repacked again and again and again, and trying to really get down to the nitty-gritty of what we wanted. And so that in and of itself was like this whole journey of what is the least amount of things that I need in order to support myself on this journey? And in what ways then can I rely on myself for the things that I won't have, or I don't have, or I choose not to have because of the restrictions of travel, etc. Anyone's interested, I can share all of that. The biggest thing is layers. Again, every word that I use can be used across so many different things. When you prepare in layers, you're able to put on what you need at the time and take off what you don't need at the time as well. So it was really very interesting. Even when we got there, people were like, "Oh, do I have this?" They were giving free things, and we really had to make a decision whether what someone else was giving, what someone else was saying was something that was right for us. And then mentally, I also had to prepare. I had an intention to go, and I really believe in the power of manifestation. So I knew that whatever I put my mind to, however I felt about it, would then help me to create a circumstance where something could happen. And I was very open from the beginning that anything would happen and that I was just going to be part. I wanted to go as an intention of seeing this mountain, seeing what it was, seeing all the, places, around there, but was open to receiving whatever I was supposed to get. And then I think more than anything, the spiritual side just speaks to anything that we don't know. And the fact that if you are, it's not even that if you have to be open to whatever is on the other side. So when you make a decision to go somewhere, you're not going to know what it's going to give you. You're not going to know what you're going to face, right? And so you have to kind of, in my opinion, be open to facing whatever it is. And I think all of this then goes on having some kind of fallback. whether it be ourselves, whether it be our friends, whether it be something that you read, like a book and get inspiration, but something that you can gain strength from because any one of these preparations that you do is not going to be complete any way you do it. Any thoughts that anyone has about their own journey and kind of preparing for something and then, yeah, curious if you agree with what I say, you can relate to what I say.
I think it's quite hard for some people to not, even though you're preparing for something quite life-changing, I really feel there are some people who just doesn't they don't take it in. I know I
Mm,
probably would be that person as well, that I go with the flow, and I literally didn't prepare for my either of my births, right?
mm.
But obviously I'd been in, the realm of birth for many, many years before I had my first baby. But I think the preparation part, and we see it in our world that there are some women who say, oh, yeah, I'll get around to it, I'll get around to it, but they never do.
Right.
And I think because of your character, you are somebody who will do for you, but you also will do for your sweet husband and your friend. um, you will have shared all this information with them as well.
Yeah, no,
It,
I think you speak to a good point. Like I think it's very all of this, it doesn't preclude going with the flow. I think that
oh, okay.
yeah. No, it's a good point that you make. So I think that on the one hand, I think yes, preparation for something is important because you can potentially expect what you might encounter, and but there's only so much that you can do. So I
Mm,
think part of it is marrying going with the flow, which is as well as preparing. And
mm,
for me, preparing is less about necessarily knowing what you will expect, but preparing yourself to be able to face anything that comes. And so it
mm,
doesn't mean that you can't react to it. It doesn't mean that you won't be affected by it, but the reality of life is that we face things and then if we can't move on from them then we get stuck, and that might influence other things. It might influence the way that we parent or the way that our health is and how then we kind of move through life. So it's really good that you say that. I think there has to be a marriage of going with the flow, and that comes with some kind of preparation of knowing yourself or knowing what you might face or
mm.
knowing what you can rely on if you encounter any issues. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of preparation, of knowing yourself, and that knowing yourself allows you to be able to face things slightly better than you would
Yeah. Mm.
otherwise. So yeah, we got ready, and if you can believe it, for a 3-week trip, we literally only had our backpack and one other bag. And I can tell you, other people that came with like 3 or 4 big suitcases. I don't know how they did it, but what I found really fascinating for this very spiritual pilgrimage is a lot of people brought fancy clothes, and yeah, and what I thought was really interesting was that you could tell that they were doing the trip for the Instagram photos that they were going to take. Which is fine. A lot of people do that. So that was really interesting. But it was a grueling 14-hour trip, from San Francisco to Hong Kong. And when we got there, it was good. First of all, we had a 12-hour layover in Hong Kong. And interestingly enough, in Hong Kong, I don't know if any of you have been there, but when you go to any of the lounges, if you dare extend your feet and look like you're slightly comfortable sleeping, they will wake you up. So we had a 12-hour layover, which then became 16 hours because of this severe weather where we had like a red alert, black alert. Anyway, so from the beginning, our trip, kind of made us get on our feet and I guess deal with whatever came our way. And then we finally arrived in Kathmandu, which is the capital of Nepal. Oh, when we first got there, I got a little sidetracked. If you saw in my own Instagram, I had an acute digestive issue, which led me to, so we got in very, very, like, I would say 1 a.m. And by 2 a.m., I was in the emergency room in Kathmandu. And it wasn't hilarious, but it was really, I guess, foreshadowing the way the rest of the trip went. So this is very interesting. I've obviously been to India many times, but in Kathmandu, this was a medical college, and interestingly enough, I went in for the digestive issue. They wanted to take X-rays, which I was like, why do you need X-rays? One of the things that you really appreciate when you travel overseas is that even though we actually think our healthcare in the United States is not great, it's fairly good. When they took an X-ray of me, I requested a lead, one of these lead things that you put on, the lead shields. They said, "Oh, you don't need a lead shield." So God only knows what happened to me on those X-rays. While I had taken off all of, the electronics and things that were on me, they got stolen. So this was the first day, no sleep, and the way that it went. But things got slightly better. And again, this is where later on I'll talk about community and having people to support you. My husband and my friend really supported me, and somehow I got through that very difficult digestive issue. But the the next after that day of resting, we went and it was really great. So aside, I was not only sidetracked, but I was somewhat, I would say, on my back for quite a bit of that first day in Kathmandu. And I was really, really praying that things just got resolved. And literally, right? So for me, this theme of transformation was there every single moment, right at the last minute, right before the next morning we started our kind of sightseeing journey and journey in Nepal. I got better. And so we did the bird's eye view. So we did an Everest expedition flight tour, and I'll just take you a little bit on that tour. This was actually quite a bit into the trip, and you can see that mountains are like emerging from the clouds. It was absolutely brilliant and amazing to see. This video doesn't nearly capture what it was about, but oops. So we started off going to, you'll see, like we had to get on a plane, and we basically flew across the Himalayan mountain range so we could see it. Now, when we got there, it was very cloudy. So, like I said, everything started very kind of dismal, and we thought, oh my gosh, what are we spending our money on? We're probably not going to see anything. So you can see, like, it was overcast. This is the city, as we got on the plane and as we left, still a little bit overcast, couldn't see anything, even just normal view. We started to see some things beautiful. Still, it was a little bit overcast, but it was such an amazing sight because from basically cloudiness and no visibility, slowly we started as we went higher and higher, you literally saw, like from dust, but it was from the clouds, mountains that just began to grow and emerge. And this is the Himalayan mountain range. We saw Mount Everest, and it was just absolutely breathtaking, absolutely gorgeous. These right above the clouds peeking up are something called Gauri Shankar. And then we saw this, I think, I don't know if it's fresh water, but this body of water up high. It was just incredible. After that, we did quite a bit of sightseeing. So we went to various places that have significance in that area. So, like I said, there's a lot of mythology that different spiritual beings, there are temples associated, monasteries, different places that had quite a bit of history, and so many people, were there. Initially, the first day when we were there, we decided to do something that was very special to us. So we went and visited an animal shelter, which was really, really amazing. We went on an expedition looking for the Apple Watch that was stolen at the hospital. And we actually, it was so fascinating. This was one of those things where you're so close and yet so far away. Apple Watches or Apple devices, if you don't know, they connect only when you're 20 feet away. And so we could do that. We did the Find My, and we said, okay, let's just go on an expedition in Kathmandu. Things have gone sideways already. And we literally were like at 20 feet away from where the watch was, but no one would. Everybody acted as if they had no idea what we were talking about, even though we connected to the watch. So, anyways, that was the first day. And then the second day, like I said, we went through this circuit of various places that are fairly famous, many of which are associated even with the idea of birth and important places, honoring the divine feminine. And so I felt that that was really fitting, for like my entire journey. I'll show you a couple of pictures afterwards. We went to so many places, and part of this was I thought acclimatization, but the elevation that we went on all of these places were only like I would say in the 4,000, 6,000 feet. So while we were visiting these places, it was kind of easy. So each trip that we took, like I said before, our journey was grueling even before we got to going to the mountain. We every single day we slept for I would say 2 hours. Every single day we drove to get from one place to the other for about 10 hours, 12 hours. I mean, it was absolutely grueling. And so it was interesting being in a land where our tour operator actually didn't share much about, the details of what we were doing. I don't know if that was good or I don't know if that was bad. And going back to the preparation that we were talking about, this is where I really feel that your eyes wide open is much better than eyes closed, like you said. So I think it's good to go with the flow, which is what we did. But knowing what is going to happen, I think helps. For some people, it creates anxiety. So I mean, there's always like this, balance of what to do. So we went to so many different places and saw so many different things, and it was actually really, really wonderful. So this is us at the animal shelter, where it was really wonderful to connect to the animals. We went to temples where actually pictures were not allowed, but I snuck some pictures in. What I thought was fascinating was the architecture mixture of what I would say as Indian or Hindu, but also then with the outer, more East Asian Buddhist influence as well. We went to a place called Dakshina Kali, again, honoring the divine feminine. And I was so excited to go to this place. But when we got there, what we realized was that they had done, or they were doing, or they allowed live how do I say, sacrifices. So that was pretty jarring for us. And it was interesting to see in traditional, this is a typical, it was a Hindu temple. And in all of my experiences, I've never ever seen or heard of live sacrifices. So people had brought, it was so sad, like chickens that were tied up, that were literally right next to us. It wasn't something that we could stomach, so we left. But it was fascinating also to then be open because the local tribal cultures then, mixed with the traditional Hindu culture. And so these things are honored and thought of, in these places. But so we had left that place. Here's a picture. So then we again went to nearby, there was this amazing suspension bridge. And so as you walked, you could see the entire landscape. It was absolutely beautiful. We saw amazing, it reminded me of San Francisco, all these colorful buildings and amazing, amazing sights. And one of the things that I wanted to share is that the entire trip was a transposition, a juxtaposition of all these spiritual sites, but then things that happened around them that one would potentially question, right? Whether it be around the mountain, there were garbage strewn, people defecating, and so there was this juxtaposition of immense spirituality and reverence for nature, at the same time, the complete opposite. And and so it was just very fascinating. I see this a lot in India. You see that at a stone's throw, you have temples every single, like, every couple of feet, you have a different temple, but then you also have, the garbage that is strewn and all of that. This was another temple that we saw that was right next to a monastery, which I found absolutely, like heartwarming. We met a Buddhist priest. He invited us to go and turn the prayer wheels, which was a great experience. And then he invited us inside. And it was just very sweet. We had no communication. Like I don't know what language he was speaking, but we couldn't communicate, but we communicated through our gestures, and it was just beautiful. And then there's a very famous place called Chandragiri Hills. It's a hill station atop a huge, huge hill. I think it was maybe like 13,000 feet. And at the top of there was a temple, again, dedicated to Lord Shiva. There's a lot of symbology that exists actually. And so I could do a whole another presentation around that. Locally, there is a temple called Pashupatinath, and before we did our trek, it was customary to do a ceremony, sharing our intention and asking for blessings on our trek. This is the temple that was famous. Another thing that was the juxtaposition was that in this particular temple, non-Hindus could not come. Now, my friend was or is very spiritual, and she actually wanted to come here, but I didn't take the sign. There's a sign that says no, like no non-Hindus allowed. And what that actually really meant, because who knows what someone's faith is, if you weren't brown, so it's a sort of reverse discrimination, but it was an interesting juxtaposition that in such sacred sites, even though I honor that, not everyone, was allowed. Meanwhile, you had people doing things at these sacred sites that weren't reverent at all. This was the place where it's called the Shakti Peeth. So there is a story where the divine energy, the divine feminine energy, was broken up and strewn in many places. And this was one of the places where the womb fell. So we went and visited that place. And so there's a place, this is the temple. This also others could not go. But inside the temple, inside here, I couldn't take it. There was a place where apparently the womb of the goddess, was there. So that was very interesting to be in that energy. And this is both my husband and I there outside. There were many, this is called the Sleeping Buddha. This was here, and there's so much mythology around it, like thousands and thousands of years old that was here. And there's a story around this that nobody knows who built this, but thousands and thousands of years ago, a farmer was digging and he found this statue, and I think the monarchy at the time, the kingdom, tried to get rid of it. And ever since then, even to this day, apparently, they are not allowed to come and visit this place. And supposedly there's some curse because of the fact that they wanted to, destroy it. So very, very fascinating things that we saw. We visited places up on the hill, on the mountain, another temple.
Viji,
Yes.
you mentioned they wanted to destroy the Buddha. Could you explain who they are?
Oh, the monarchy, the kingdom. So the king,
Mm.
that king, and so what the story goes that because of the actions of that king, the entire monarchy is like unable to. There was a curse placed on the monarchy, and so I think that
Mm.
there are even events that have taken place. I don't remember the exact history, but they aren't allowed to come and visit that place, and so some kind of energetic effect happened to that monarchy because of, either denial or wanting to destroy it.
Mm.
so we did all of those, that the sightseeing, visiting temples, visiting monasteries, and other monuments. What we also did was, you can see here all these switchbacks. We
Mm.
actually traveled all of this. This was one of the scariest parts because we were traveling the mountain. We were literally on the edge of the mountain in a huge bus where there was no room even for the bus, but then ended up two buses traveling in opposite directions. It was just closing your eyes, taking your bonine for motion sickness, and praying that you survive the trip. But it was fascinating. So the journey to go on the trek itself required such an immense, like most of my time was traveling to get to the mountain. It was so far inwards and upwards that it took a long time to get there. And as we traveled, I definitely was affected by the altitude. My friend was not at all, and then my husband was as well. So, but I was affected the most. I vomited a lot. It was very, very difficult to breathe. And one of the things that they did along the way, every day we would have your a pulse ox reading, and we wanted it to be approximately above 80% oxygen saturation. For me, it got as low as like 50 something. So it was pretty bad,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
difficult for me. And it's something that I couldn't have planned. And so we had traveled and we had reached the border. So this is a place along the border. And when I say border, the border of Nepal and China. Or the border of Nepal and Tibet. And so this was a small little monastery with a prayer wheel inside that we visited. I wanted to share that when we got to the border in and of itself was like, at every point along the journey, we were tested. So when we got to the border, they had two computers. Like most of the time, the computers were down, and we needed a physical stamp to leave Nepal. That was called immigration. That consisted of I don't have the picture here, but a single, let's say, like dilapidated, very small, building. I would say 100 people stampeding, trying to get their passports
Yeah.
stamped. The
Mm.
computer's not working, and so people waiting there for hours. So just to leave Nepal once we got to the border, it took almost 2 days. So a lot of this was waiting, and it reminded me of the times where, like, you're in labor or you're not in labor and you're waiting to get into labor, and and it wasn't a question that anybody could answer. Well, when can we cross the border? Nobody knew, including the guides, right?
Mm.
And so at every point we were pushed. And so that's really, like, so is the juxtaposition of seeing all these amazing sights, but at every point there was an obstacle thrown in our way, every single one. So then, not that much, like, I don't know, maybe less than a mile, because we walked to the China border. That in and of itself also was, we waited at the border in the blaring hot sun for about 8 hours before we even were able to move past. At every point of the journey, there was some kind of obstacle thrown in the way. And what I was proud of, and when I shared about preparation, was that I think it was something that I had prepared for. So while normally it may be something that would cause frustration or, anger, or confusion or even anxiety, for me, it was something that I just accepted as part of the journey. Going through the journey, we had to adapt. And if you didn't adapt, then you would face, a lot of hurdle. And I think this is the same thing about anything that we push through in life, any obstacle that we face. Sometimes it's easier just to surrender. And it doesn't mean that you don't fight for what you want or fight for something that you believe in. But there were things, like I talked about, like the altitude that we couldn't do, the timing, whether the Chinese immigration officers were on lunch or not. And so I think part of the journey and part of the pilgrimage, part of the transformation was to be able to learn how to adapt to all of these changes, all of these differences from what we're used to, what you're used to in the United States or how things go. And for me, that was such a huge part. And I had seen in the people around us, people that were able to adapt and then people that weren't. And Lynn had shared with me that she felt that I had changed as a part of this journey. And one of the biggest things that I think I took away was the fact of rest and resilience, because I found it fascinating that we saw this immensely beautiful, solid, grounded piece of earth, the mountain, that doesn't move. And we are asked to actually circumambulate around it. And most of the time we're focused on our actions, what we do, the trek, are we making it? Do we have the things? We're kind of focused on all of that action. Meanwhile, the mountain is there in stillness, teaching us what we actually really need to do. And so for me, I'll tell you something. Although I did not get any rest on the journey itself, there were days where I had stood awake. Well, I would say sat awake all night, just focusing on my breathing. So, oftentimes in labor and in pregnancy, we talk, or anything, when we're dealing with pain, when we're dealing with anything, we often are taught to bring it back to our breath. It's interesting that when you practice breathing and breath work in a situation that doesn't push you, and then you get to a situation where breath itself is your life. So I stayed awake all night one night just to help my oxygen level go from 57 to 80, because I really wanted to make sure that I am able to continue on this journey. And every fiber of my mind had to be concentrated on my breath in order for me to have brought my oxygen level up. It was just absolutely fascinating. But I think that one of the things that we didn't get and that we were pushed out of getting is rest. And I think that this is really integral to any part of any journey, because if it allows you the ability to step back and look at what you need to do, look at what's going on inside of you, and then be able to have the strength and energy to actually provide yourself with that. And so just these last couple of slides that I wanted to go over is just the things that I learned, from this journey, and then I'd be happy to take any questions. So this is an opportunity where actually we did take time to just rest and be one with nature, sit with the water. And I think there's just so many parts of a journey that, like I talked about, I think the mindset begins even before you get there, which allows you to then implement alongside with the physicality of what's going on, and being able to actually allow yourself to be transformed then gives you, I think, what the journey itself, wants you to do. And so, I alluded to this a lot. I think that the preparation was important, the adaptation to what was happening was important, giving yourself the ability to surrender into what was going on, and refueling yourself was important to create that continued resilience, and then allowing for that transformation. So I wanted to share, I feel that what happened on the trip was that a lot of people came to the mountain to get something from it. But I think more than anything, for each person, it revealed, what was inside of them. And some people came into it with an attitude of entitlement. Some people came to it with an attitude of longing. Some people came to it attitude of surrender. And I think it's that when you face what comes out of you and how you meet it, that is for me what the pilgrimage, was about. I wanted to share this video really quickly about when, after I did my first part of the trek. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you. First leg is done. I think we are above 16,000 feet, and we have made it to the guest lodge. We've got an overflow of people who are doing it this year because it's a horse year. So thousands of people are doing it, and so they don't have enough room in the guest houses
So we have 5 people in 4 beds, but that we will manage. I am just humbled. I walked quite a bit, but then I had to take the help of a pony. My blood oxygen levels were low. I'm just humbled, when the entire process, when you're doing this, you are just brought to your knees. You you have to be okay being like naked in front of people. If you have to pee somewhere, you gotta pee. And all sorts of things go wrong in your body. You've got gas, you've got to pee, you've got to poop, you can't pee, you can't poop. And it just reminds me of all of the women that I've ushered through thresholds, but how so very important it is that we have support and that we support one another. That life is such a sacred journey and it's difficult at times, but worth the struggle. The views were amazing, which I will show. Thank you for just being there and listening. I
What I find was the biggest part of this was that so many people came to this trip to tell someone that they went around a mountain. And for me, what I learned is that telling someone I didn't make it all around was the biggest thing that I would have walked away from. And I think that that's because I think what happened was that I expected that the mountain would change people. We went into it very humble. I didn't know whether I would make it or not. I decided that I would try. But what I saw happen in the trip was that it revealed what we had inside of us, And so with all of the things that we didn't know that we could face, whether it be the altitudes, for many people, I witnessed extraordinary compassion. And then and in other ways, I experienced people who actually put their own needs above others and just kind of went along, the way. And it's fascinating because I think this is where we can choose the circumstances. Sometimes we can choose the circumstances that we're in, and sometimes we can't. But it's 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 never the way that we thought it was going to be. And it's always, you always have, the divine and the muck together. It's something that is inseparable. And I think that this is seen across all of these thresholds. What we need to understand is that the experiences that we have outside of us, whether it be traveling to a mountain or anything that we encounter, I don't think that it creates who we are. It shows who we are. And so you can have these experiences by traveling, or you can have these experiences by staying where we are. And I realized feeling safe is just so important. And when you can't breathe, you don't feel safe, right? And so I had a lot of physical issues when I was there. The moment I came back home, all of those issues disappeared. And so it just really spoke to me about how important feeling safe, being surrounded by things and people that give you that sense of safety is. And important to know that before we kind of cross these thresholds. The other thing is that community and systems are so important. We had to rely on each other, during this time. And I think that none of these thresholds are meant to be walked alone. And so it's important that we find that community, find that support. And finally, whatever I thought that we were going to do, some of it we did, some of it we didn't. And I think that what's so important is to gain the benefits, gain the beauty of whatever is in front of us, rather than assuming or expecting or absolutely wanting a particular outcome, because you most likely won't get that. And finally, I do think that I changed quite a bit after this trip. I still am unable to articulate it. This is the first time that I've talked about it since coming back. And I think that there is a very a large part of me that died on the trip, but then an even greater part that was birthed. And I'm still not yet sure, what that is. And I think the lesson from this is to be okay with parts of us that we may not need any longer, and then be open to and allow the space, even if you are not sure what it is, to be born, from yourself. So I'm really actually excited to take what this journey has given me and what I have learned and really bring it more into my work. I think the greatest pilgrimage, I think, is the one that we take inward. And while I went so far to learn so much, I think the thing that I learned more than ever is that I don't need to go anywhere but myself, and that there are all of these lessons that are waiting to be seen, waiting to be understood, waiting to be known, and waiting to be shared. So thank you so much for your time, guys. I appreciate it.
I was curious. I mean, you talk a lot about your experiences, but I'm curious how Ishwa and your friend also, how, just briefly, how
Mm.
did they handle stuff?
I think we all handled it the same. There were a lot of
Mm,
difficulties that we faced. My friend found difficulties assimilating, being a Westerner in a completely different culture, not understanding language, not understanding even like the cultural norms or the practices, and like for the prayers or any of that. And so I think she felt very much not very much displaced. So I think
yeah,
for her, as she went on this journey, that was something that she had to carry. She did
yeah,
not face the physicality. We didn't know, but she didn't face
no.
she was probably the only person there who she was the only person who was different, you know.
Mm,
Um, but she was only Caucasian, but she was the only person who actually had no issues related to the terrain, which was
mm,
fascinating. So,
mm,
what is, and then Ishwar, my husband, because he struggles with pain in his day-to-day life, he also struggled with that. He struggled with altitude sickness, getting migraine headaches, feeling nauseous, losing appetite, these kind of
mm,
things. But, he pushed through. And the way that I think each one of us committed to each other to support each other. And I think that's how we all got through it. And so when
mm,
one person couldn't do it, we actually wanted the others to continue to do their part. And
mm,
that I think that was the way that we stuck together. So we created a sense of safety for each other. We all had different things. I also had altitude sickness. My
mm,
oxygen levels went down. I couldn't breathe. So when you can't
mm.
breathe,
Yeah, very
it doesn't become a war of wills. It becomes, can you actually even do this? And
yeah,
so, a lot of women, I'm reminded when they, they want medicine, they struggle over decisions that they want to make during labor. Should I take medicine? Should I not take medicine? Oh my God, this is bad to take medicine. All of those things, really, I mean, I don't think that's the case at all. We have to look at our individual case, what we're going through. And if you are going to choose trauma over a decision to get support, then you're going to
yeah.
have to face that trauma. Or you say, I'm going to get support and it's okay.
Mm.
Sometimes the ending, is not the goal.
It's interesting because I think there's opportunity that you could have taken a small canister of oxygen.
I
You could
did.
have, right?
I did. We did take it. It didn't help.
Oh,
We did,
interesting.
we did take it. We all took it. It didn't help.
Did not help. Interesting. Hmm. Yeah, good to know.
Well, didn't so the canister of oxygen for the one that we got was the one that
Yeah,
we had to like, breathe in. And if you were going to do
yeah,
that, you were literally going to have to puff that thing the entire
yeah.
way. There
And
were
have the
others,
energy.
yeah, there were others that you saw had cannulas that were
Yeah,
actually having
yeah,
continuous
flow.
flow. We
Mm,
were not offered that. And that
mm,
was another thing, like I really value what support means. What kind of guidance, what kind of support does one need on a trip? Again, this is not speaking bad about anybody, but to really be aware of like, who the tour operator was, what kind of support do they give? Do they give explanations and ways in which you can overcome things, before you get into a situation?
Correct. Good to know.
Really lovely to hear your reflection and great graphics. I told that to you last time too. Yeah, your graphics are really great to detail your journey in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and really resonate with a lot of what you shared about just any type of pilgrimage and journey and what that really, where does it ever lead us back to? Just always back to the same place. And you saved us a trip from going going walking around that mountain. But I recently spoke to someone who did the what's the one in
Annapurna?
Europe?
Oh,
No, what's the one in Europe? The San there's a famous pilgrimage in Europe. A lot of like Catholic Christian people go on. And basically they were just like, the journey itself is reflective of just the spiritual experience. Like everything that arises on the journey is just exactly what it is. And even as you were sharing about like the juxtaposition or the dichotomy between like garbage and poop and temples, like in some ways that makes a lot of sense, that it's like the things that are most attracted, it's like the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. That just in our human experience, it's like those, the greatest suffering that I'm so glad that the experiences of greatest suffering are the ones that are around the place where the spiritual presence is so anchored. But yeah, what a beautiful experience, and how generous of you to like reflect and digest it and to share it in this way.
But the piece between what you've experienced and human nature in the birth focus, it's so true, right? We are pushed to the very edge of, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. Oh my God, I can't do this anymore. But it's about the goal at the end of the day, right? Doesn't matter what goal we're trying to achieve. Having that willpower to say, no, I can do this a different way, or I can, like the breathing, the moment
there are different ways.
There are different ways. And the fact that, as you were talking to me about not getting enough oxygen, I've recently learned those deep breathing movements that you probably didn't even have the energy to deep breathe into your lower lungs, right? And then imagine that oxygen going to your toes, right? Like you say, you believe in that conception of visualization and knowing that's going to happen. In that moment of not being able to get your breath, that's where we have to go. That thought of taking in the oxygen, seeing the oxygen disperse through our body. Even basic stuff like that might have helped as well.
Yeah. It was so fascinating because when they were taking my oxygen level, I remember feeling so like happy and giddy, and there was no stress, and I actually felt fully oxygenated. Okay. And and I was just kind of like, you put your finger in it, and I was just I was actually quite happy, and they were like, okay, close your eyes, just like calm down. And so it was fascinating because I had to concentrate in order to get my oxygen level up. So I was deep breathing, but even when I was deep breathing, it wasn't enough. I had to I mean, it was almost like in a way that I didn't know. But then, when I did it, you could just see the oxygen level rise. And like I said, yeah, I was fascinated by the fact that I had to choose oxygenation versus sleep. And I chose oxygenation because I was like, I really want to see what happens. But yeah, anyways,
the scenario you described reminds me of conversations I've had with people where they may have been on that verge of death, right? And that feeling of how happy they were. And we've read it and we've heard about it on TV and stuff. That feeling of euphoria, because the oxygen levels, even though it was scary, there's that feeling of euphoria. And that's what happens prior to death, my darling. So I'm really glad you're still here with us.
No, but you know what? The truth is that like I am not afraid to die because of all of this. I
Yes,
just feel
right.
like it's just one transformation into
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, and you're like, it's kind of like in your pilgrimage, hearing how, like you said, the adaptation, we don't control most of the forces of what actually happens in life. We might be under the illusion that we control, like have some type of influence, but ultimately, life can bring us to our knees. And where life goes, and it's how much are we resisting reality versus able to accept and adapt to whatever is actually happening, which yeah, in your reflection, it sounds like you are doing so beautifully as much as you could and each stage, like you can prepare for the oxygen canister, but that's not the reality of what might actually be happening. And you could, yeah.
But I just wanted to respond to that because I think I can relate to that very much, but I would just take it one step further. I think for me, the biggest part about like when you said like knowing yourself was that like there was just only one principle for me, and that was that I am enough whether I walk or whether I don't walk.
Hmm.
And that was all it was. And so in
That's
knowing that,
beautiful.
when that moment happened, because my husband, I didn't want my husband to make a decision to go or not go because of me. I didn't want my friend who came with me, to not go or go because of me. And so I was just really, and I also then didn't want to push myself into a position of maybe not being safe by going or not going. And so I think for me, it was just that I valued that greater power as a part of me as well, that same divinity does not only exist in the macrocosm, but also in the microcosm within me. And that by just honoring that, not knowing, not needing to understand, but just by honoring and seeing it and saying that like what I feel is valid, what I feel is important, and it is not more important than like so if I were to have done something different, would it have been for me, or would it have been to share with somebody else that I did this, or would it have been to check mark something, I
Hmm.
finished this, and would the finishing be
Hmm.
more important than the decision I made? And so that's kind of what I took away as well. Someone else asked me, like, would I do it again? I'm not going to answer the question quite yet, but I would say that just because something was hard or difficult doesn't mean that it wasn't fulfilling and worth it. So it was really, really hard, actually, but yeah, but worth it. I think when you go through these things, you can choose to meet life differently. So if something's hard, if something's not easy, if something's painful, does it mean that it's bad? No.
And it also doesn't mean that if you were to go again, it would be the same. It would be different.
Exactly.
You have no idea how it would be.
Exactly.